Hello, and welcome to Unity of Fredericksburg. My name is Linda, and I'm pleased to welcome all of you to the Unity of Fredericksburg weekly online gathering. At Unity of Fredericksburg, we are advancing the movement of spiritual awakening and transformation through unity, a positive path for spiritual living. We thank those of you watching on YouTube, live or later, and invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're able to attend live, we encourage you to join us in the Zoom community room for the full Sunday morning experience, including music, prayer, and connection. Our weekly newsletter includes the Sunday service link, and you can subscribe to receive that on our website at uofva.org. For everyone local to Central Virginia, Unity of Fredericksburg offers a variety of fun and enriching in-person gatherings every month. Subscribe to our weekly newsletter at uofva.org for all the details. Our message today comes from our minister, Reverend Cheryl Fair. And here's Reverend Cheryl.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you to everyone who is with me in the Zoom room right now. And also want to extend a welcome to all of you watching on YouTube, whether you're watching live or you're watching later. I appreciate the energy that you bring to this spiritual community, Unity of Fredericksburg. Our broadcast date today is Sunday, August the 2nd. Today is the first Sunday of August. Now, following the message and meditation in our Zoom meeting, which I hope more and more of you will join over time, we do celebrate birthdays on the first Sunday of the month. So I have a birthday to add to that collection. Thursday this week, August the 6th, is Myrtle Fillmore's birthday. So Myrtle Fillmore was born Mary Caroline Page on August 6th, 1845, and she chose the name Myrtle as how she wanted to be known. Myrtle was instrumental in the founding of Silent Unity, which is the 24-hour unity prayer ministry that's been going on for more than 125 years. And Myrtle's experience of healing through affirmative prayer became the foundation of the unity movement, as others, in particular her husband Charles Fillmore, witnessed her transformation and began following her example. So here is a quote from Myrtle Fillmore as we honor her birthday. There is a running to and fro from among humanity that will never cease so long as they try to explain spiritual things with the intellect. Listen to the stillness within your soul, and you will find it resonant with a new tongue. So there's a quote from Myrtle Fillmore. Happy birthday, Myrtle. Now, as we continue here at Unity of Fredericksburg with the rhythm of our annual theme for the month of August, our attention is going to be on being intentional. Now, throughout the year so far, we have approached this idea of being intentional in a number of different ways. In February, we looked at practices such as walking with intention, speaking with intention, breathing with intention. You, of course, can find all of those messages on our YouTube channel if you want to go back and catch those again. In the month of May, we took that idea of being intentional and looked at particular issues in our outer world and how spirituality links up with those. So we talked about spiritual earth care, spiritual economics, spiritual diversity. Now, all of these topics, I realized, kind of held an assumption that we know the nature of our own intentions. However, sometimes we don't, right? Sometimes we just are stuck in a pattern. We're just doing what we do without examining what lies underneath. We're kind of sleepwalking through different phases of our lives. So this month, we're going to take a step back and look at how we go about forming intentions, how we can help ourselves wake up and realize the intentions we want to form and grow. And as with many paths of discovery, developing intentions can begin with asking questions. So today we're going to look at number one, being willing to ask questions, what kind of questions we should ask, and then what do we do after we ask the questions? So that's what we're talking about today. Are you feeling ready? The name of this talk is The Mindful Art of Asking Questions. So, as I often do on Sunday morning, I'm going to encourage you to bring to mind a situation or condition in your life that you would like to experience in a different way. So there may be emotions around a particular situation that you would like to shift or resolve. There may be dynamics of your personal being or of relationships or in the outer world that you would really like to see some change. So I want you to just kind of bring something to mind for yourself. And as we get into this, the first important step in this process is recognizing that creating a shift around whatever it is means bringing about change, right? Now, have you ever noticed that we humans can be very resistant to change? Even when we want change, we can still at the same time be resistant to it because our brains kind of like the comfort zone. Our brains is like, these are the dynamics of life. We know what they are. We know what to expect. We know how to make decisions with this. If there's something new and we're required to learn and grow, we can find ourselves resisting, going to great lengths to kind of keep things the way they are. And some of us sort of cherish our peace enough, just wanting things to be calm and peaceful, that we will actually avoid doing anything that will stir that up, including asking ourselves questions. Does any of this feel familiar to you, my friends? So, today we're going to have a practice of I'll share questions and you'll have a few seconds to reflect on that. You might, if you don't have a habit of having some paper and pen nearby, you might want to grab some. You can always go back and watch the recording later if you miss something. So here's the first of several questions that we're going to ponder today regarding the situation that you are holding in mind from your life. Ask yourself, am I willing to ask questions? Am I willing to ask questions? Am I willing to bring about change? Am I willing to bring about change? And just take a breath right there. We'll just let those questions rest now as we talk about, the choices that we make are guided by what we believe, right? You know how these days, when you're working one of these things, that technology will do that kind of, if you're doing a text or something, that autofill where it starts filling in things for you. Well, it's really mimicking how our brains work because in any given situation, our brain autofills answers based on the beliefs that we have, based on past, what's happened in the past, what's likely to happen. In order to bring about change, we must be willing to question all those automatic answers that our brain provides for us. We need to be willing to question the beliefs that we've been carrying around without questioning them, because they've always worked in the past, but something's not working right now. We want something to be different. We need to be willing to question our beliefs. So take a breath and let me just ask, regarding the situation that you are holding in mind, am I willing to question my beliefs? Am I willing to question my beliefs? Am I willing to be open to new answers? Am I willing to be open to new answers? Just take a breath, my friends. Let's just let that rest. You can circle back to it later if you need to. It's time for us to move on. So let's just imagine that you've kind of made that hurdle, that you're willing and ready to ask yourself some questions around a situation where you would like to bring about some change. So what questions are you going to ask? So it's always good to look at a good role model for inspiration, right? So we could go all the way back to the philosophic uh, traditions of ancient Greece, like Socrates and Plato. There's also a tradition in the Buddhist faith of monastic debate. There are the dialogues of Confucius. There are so many possibilities. We're going to look at the example upon which the unity movement is based, and that is the teaching method of Jesus. Jesus, who we often will call in unity our way shower. And in unity, we see Jesus as the great example of how to do this human life. We don't see Jesus as the great exception. We see him as the great example. So when seeking some insight today for my talk, I got out my old copy of one of my favorite books from my Unity courses, Discover the Power Within You by Eric Butterworth. And this book is a wonderful exploration of the example of Jesus. And Butterworth begins at the beginning of the book with some thoughts about how Jesus developed his philosophy. And he starts by mentioning how the stories of how Jesus was born. And but he doesn't stick with that. So let me just read you a couple of things here. Much has been made over the manner of Jesus's birth. The Bible seems to indicate that his fellow townspeople knew nothing unusual about the incident. Thus, the great event was not the birth of Jesus, but a kind of awakening that took place within him during the years of his growth. And I'm skipping over to another quote on the next page where Butterworth says, I can imagine the young boy, Jesus, spending many hours in the hills of Galilee like any normal youth, pondering the wonders of the heavens, the sun and drifting clouds by day, the moon and stars by night. I can visualize him asking questions posed by the shepherd psalmist 1,000 years before. What is man? And so with that beginning to Butterworth's book, he shines a light on one of the key practices that Jesus shows us of asking questions. Did you know that across the four Gospels, which is basically that's where we know about Jesus, about his life and his teachings, is what's documented in those four Gospels. However, in recent years, there have been more Gospels that discovered that didn't make the cut into the Bible. So there's more for us to find out there. But just sticking with those four canonical Gospels, as they call them, Jesus asks a question about 307 times. Now, this data of 307 questions comes from multiple independent tallies by biblical scholars, not by me. I'm kind of, searching the internet for information. 307 times he asks a question. That's a lot of questions, huh? So perhaps we can find some ideas about what kinds of questions to ask ourselves from this example of Jesus. So once again, we're going to go into that space of questions and just allowing space for things to bubble up for you. So once again, you might want to bring to mind a particular sticky situation in your life. And here are some questions that Jesus asked. What do you want? What do you want? Why are you afraid? Why are you afraid? Do you want to be made well? Do you want to be made well? What are you looking for? What are you looking for? Where is your faith? Where is your faith? Why do you doubt? Why do you doubt? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? So let's all take a breath right there. And just allow those questions to settle. And again, you can always circle back to these later. You can find the recording if you wanted to write something down, you want to give yourself more time around any of these questions. We have some more to talk about here today. I'd like to follow up those questions from Jesus with some questions based on the work of Eric Butterworth again, because he was also quite a genius at proposing questions for us to consider. So let me share these questions inspired by the work of Eric Butterworth. You ready for some more questions? Here we go. What am I giving my mind to? What am I giving my mind to? What beliefs am I still accepting that no longer serve me? What beliefs am I still accepting that no longer serve me? Am I reacting to appearances or responding from principle? Am I reacting to appearances or responding from principle? What is trying to unfold through me right now? What is trying to unfold through me right now? Am I willing to see beyond the problem to possibility? Am I willing to see beyond the problem to possibility? How can I think differently about this? How can I think differently about this? Am I willing to let go of the old idea and accept a new one? Am I willing to let go of the old idea and accept a new one? What would love do here? What would love do here? Now, these are all good examples of questions that we might want to ask ourselves if we want to create a different experience in our lives. And I trust that as you spend time in reflection, you will discover the questions that are meant for you. So let's all take a breath again. Just allow all those questions to settle. So we've talked about being willing to ask questions and initiate change. Talked about what kinds of questions we can ask ourselves. Finally, our last topic, what do we do after we ask the questions? Now, going back to the example of Jesus, it's very interesting to note that Jesus asks a lot of questions and does not provide answers very often. Citations, and again, I'm kind of looking on the internet for different things. Citations note only 3 to 8 times does Jesus provide answers. What he models for us is a practice of asking questions. It's not about getting answers. Now, our brains will want to get the answer and make the right choice. That's not what Jesus models for us. He models a practice of asking questions, opening space for contemplation. And then he also models a practice of stepping aside, creating quiet space, going into what would have been called in the Bible prayer. So, what to do after asking questions? Asking a question becomes a doorway to deeper awareness. So, you might want to have a practice of doing some journaling and then move into the silence. Rest in the stillness. Allow that practice of asking a question to open sacred space for contemplation. Now, in contemplation, you're not trying to get answers. You're seeking to become attuned with the guidance of spirit. Insight naturally comes about when the noise settles. So the practice is a focus on being present, a focus on inner listening. Contemplation invites you to notice rather than think through something. Just notice what's coming up, what thoughts come up, what feelings come up. Just notice. It's a practice of awareness rather than analysis, because we're not focused on the product, right? We're focused on the process, not the products. It's not about get an answer, make the right choice. It's about being in the process, about noticing, allowing the truth to reveal itself in its own way, in its own timing. It is a practice of something we have talked about recently, surrender, releasing the need to control or fix or force things, just being willing to ask questions. So, as we start wrapping up this talk and prepare for our time of meditation, I have one more quote for you because it is all of this is part of an ongoing process. And Eric Butterworth talks about this at the end of Discover the Truth Within You. Just listen to that title, Discover the Truth Within You, a guide to the unexplored depths within. Here's what he says near the end of the book. You are not done yet. No matter what may be the level of your experiences at the moment, you are not done yet. There is more in you. And the experience itself is an opportunity to grow through as you go through each challenge. So we're now going to move into our time of meditation together. I invite you once again to take a couple of deep breaths as we settle a bit further into this moment and just notice the feeling of the breath in your body. Notice the feeling of the body in the seat. Take a moment to notice the feeling of the clothing on your body. Just notice that. How does that feel? We will now practice shining the light of truth through every cell of the body, every thought and feeling held in consciousness, as we affirm, I am willing to ask questions that awaken my spiritual understanding. Yes, I am. I am willing. My questions illuminate the truth already present within me. By questioning, I shine the light into unexplored corners of my consciousness. I pause and reflect, knowing insight arises in the stillness of my inner being. And now let us move into a time in the stillness together. We begin to bring our awareness back to the here and now of our human experience. Just once again, bring your attention to the breath in the body, claiming that this ongoing activity of asking gentle questions and shining the light of truth will continue even as we go through the necessary steps of our daily lives. Let's all claim my questions help me see beyond appearance and into the reality of divine mind. Reflection creates space for wisdom, clarity, and inspired action. And let's close out with one more affirmation. This one I will say once and then invite you to repeat it with me a couple times. I listen deeply and receive guidance with an open heart. Say it with me. I listen deeply and receive guidance with an open heart. Let's say it one more time. I listen deeply and receive guidance with an open heart. And so it is. Thanks so much, my friends. I'm going to hand it back to our friend Linda to wrap up our YouTube broadcast.
Thank you, Reverend Cheryl, and thank you all for watching the weekly broadcast from Unity of Fredericksburg. Visit our website, uofva.org, to learn more about our mission of spiritual awakening and transformation, and support our ministry with your financial